Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. If you're even slightly aware of what's going on in the world, you probably know at this point the United States is a dumpster fire right now. And we are getting hit with all the problems at once. There's a lot of problems that I know won't be solved without a lot of us banding together, but I figured I can address the one problem that I slightly have knowledge about and can give a bunch of different ways of getting around it. Among the myriad of things that have gone wrong, one of them involves a big box chain craft store called JoAnn's. Now, JoAnn's is a very popular craft store within the United States among people who use yarn because the yarn that they provide is very cheap, which means it's more affordable for the people who use it, and they have a bigger variety of yarn than a lot of the other chain craft stores that are out there. However, JoAnn's has declared bankruptcy for the second time, which means that a lot of areas in the United States are about to enter a craft desert, if they aren't already in one. Now, while I am sad to see this resource go, for people who rely on JoAnn's, particularly small businesses who use JoAnn's as their main source for getting supplies, I don't see JoAnn's pulling out of this. They simply did not make any of the changes that they needed to make since the first time that they experienced bankruptcy, and quite honestly, the way that they were running their business was unsustainable. So we're at the point right now where unless someone buys JoAnn's and saves the store, it's gone. We're not going to have a JoAnn's anymore. And it's clear that the way in which we're going to buy yarn is going to change. So what I'm going to be doing with this video is I'm going to be listing all the different ways in which you will be able to buy yarn after JoAnn's has gone bankrupt. With the exception of one of the places, I am in support of every one of them. So the two main ways in which you can buy yarn is in person or online. I know a lot of us would prefer to shop in person, but I also know that that's not going to be realistic for many people, especially people who live in areas where the human population is a lot more sprawled out. I'm talking like the Midwest here. But these in-person places will still exist. The first option that comes to mind are the other two remaining big box chain craft stores in the United States, and those are Michael's and Hobby Lobby. The people who shopped at JoAnn's usually prefer JoAnn's to Michael's or Hobby Lobby because in the case of Michael's yarn selection was not as big. Michael's had less of a variety of yarn than JoAnn's did. In the case of Hobby Lobby, a lot of us didn't like Hobby Lobby's politics. And Hobby Lobby is the only option here in which, if you can avoid going to Hobby Lobby, please. From what I've heard, they've had good quality yarn, but unfortunately, they have committed some very serious crimes that I don't think should be overlooked. In place of Hobby Lobby, I'm going to be putting an article that explains everything that they did, and you can go from there. Another way that you can try searching for yarn is through thrift stores. Now, thrift stores, if you can find yarn there, amazing deal. However, the majority of thrift stores in the United States I've come across do not sell yarn. If you do see yarn there, it's a very small selection and it's very hit or miss. You could go the route of buying old pieces, knit or crochet and whatnot, taking it apart and reusing the yarn. Quite honestly, the moment that you repurpose the yarn and try to use it for something else, that yarn's a different animal than if you're using a new skein. And the integrity of the yarn, depending on how long that it's been in that position, may have deteriorated over time. It might be just as frustrating to knit with or crochet with, rather than if you had just sprung the extra money to buy a brand new skein of yarn. There are also places within communities, I'm not sure how prevalent these are, where you can actually bring craft supplies to the place and then either barter with more craft supplies or just like bring some, take some. It may involve money, it may not. I know there's a place called the Resource Exchange that might work like that. Now, the best solution for indoor shopping that I think is going to be around are the local yarn stores. When our way of shopping breaks down, I think this is where we're going to go back to, is going to the more local stores, especially once the tariffs get put into place and it becomes a lot more expensive for us to import items from other countries into the United States. So with our local yarn stores, it can be hard to know where to find your local yarn store because unless you're like in the yarn community on social media, you might not come across it. One of the ways that I found my local yarn store was I was looking up yarn crawls. And to be quite honest, I didn't know about the majority of the local yarn stores that were in the Philadelphia area until I went on the Philly yarn crawl. I found yarn crawls through this website called Knitter Events. It's written by Clara Parks, who is one of the experts of sourcing wool in the United States at the moment. I was able to find different yarn crawls through that website, and there's more that I want to go on, but that's how you can find a lot of yarn stores in the area. However, not every area has a yarn crawl, which is where this comes in handy. This is a book called Needle Travel. It also exists as a website, and this is a compendium of all the local yarn stores known in the United States. It also includes fabric stores, your guide to quilting, knitting, needlepoint, crocheting, weaving, spinning, cross-stitch, and embroidery stores in the United States. So if you like fiber, this is your guide, and this will tell you what the local ones are near you. Now, I do realize that there is a trade-off when it comes to local yarn stores. The yarns that are in the local yarn stores are more expensive than the ones that were available at JoAnn's because they're more likely to get it straight from the source and they're not as commercially made. So they might not be quite as affordable for a lot of people, unfortunately, because like the average skein was about $20. However, I think for the yarn that is in the local yarn stores, that price is worth it because it takes a lot of effort to spin the yarn, then to dye it, and to card it, and to do all the things that make it such a great quality yarn. It's also good to explore the different yarns that are available in your area. It's also good to put money into the local yarn stores at this point because I think we know that trickle-down economics doesn't work. The other way in which you can buy yarn is you can order yarn online. The good news about this is there are several websites out there that are specifically dedicated to selling yarn. So websites that do this include Webs, Knit Picks, Yarnspirations, Hobby, which is not Hobby Lobby. Hobby is located in Denmark, and these all produce a huge variety of yarns, and they have the cheaper quality yarns that you typically would expect in a JoAnn's. Like Yarnspirations is the one who's responsible for Karen yarns, for example. Also, if you can't make it to your local yarn store, chances are your local yarn store has a website or a way to buy yarn. Many local yarn stores have their own websites. It's also handy if you go on a yarn crawl and then you end up liking a yarn and you want to get more of it. Say there was a yarn that I really liked on a yarn crawl in Maine. I don't necessarily have to drive all the way back up to Maine from Philly in order to get it. I can just buy the yarn from the website of the local yarn store. There's also a lot of small businesses who do not have a brick and mortar store who sell yarn online. This includes the indie dyers, the hand spinners, farmers. Lots of them have their own websites or ways to contact them on social media in which you can buy yarn directly from them. Another way you might want to think about going about getting yarn is if you're using JoAnn's before, chances are you likely have a favorite brand of yarn that you like to get from there. So if you save yourself the yarn wrapper from a yarn that you use a lot, like this one's the Karen 1 pound. I know that I don't have to touch this one. I know exactly what I'm getting. You can just type it into your search engine that you prefer using and just see if they have a website. Two of the really popular ones from JoAnn's, Lion Brand and Bernat, have their own websites for their yarn in which you are able to directly buy the yarn from the manufacturer. Now, does it suck that you're not going to be able to touch the yarn? Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does, but knowing that these websites exist is better than nothing. So I think the last thing to address is that there are some yarn brands that, because JoAnn's is disappearing, that these yarn brands are likely to disappear as well because JoAnn's, surprise, surprise, had their own brand of yarn. There are two different house brands for JoAnn's. So one was Big Twist, which I will be sad to see go. They had a very good acrylic quality yarn. The other one was KNC, which stood for Knit and Crochet. The best solution I have for this at this point, because I don't know if they're going to continue making those brands of yarns or not, is buy them up as much as you can if JoAnn's liquidates everything. And then going forward, if you use Big Twist or KNC for a project and then you run out, there's this website called YarnSub. YarnSub is very, very useful. They have a compendium of a lot of different brands of yarn and what they're made of, how thick they are, and a lot of important information. You can type in the yarn that you're looking for and they will suggest a dupe for that yarn. So they will suggest something that will be an alternative that's not exactly the same, but it'll be close enough. I think by the time that we run out of Big Twist, we will have found out what the best equivalent for Big Twist is. And that's what I got. So it's going to be buying yarn this way going to be more difficult. Yeah. Going to JoAnn's was convenient, and going to JoAnn's serviced a lot of crafters. And the fact that we now no longer have this place where we go and buy yarn, I think it's going to impact the craft community for a little bit. But if we funnel our efforts into going directly to the manufacturer or directly to the smaller businesses, it's entirely possible that we will never be out of yarn throughout however long this dumpster fire in the United States is going to go on for. I hope that helps you. Again, if you need references to any of this material, it's going to be in the description box. That was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.